Hello everybody and welcome. Now before I go ahead and show you the actual challenge itself, what I'd like you to go ahead and do, I would like to just take a little step back and say well done for getting this far, especially if you're brand new to Blender, because it can be very overwhelming. And I hope you've been following along with the exercises, understanding what's been going on and applying them yourself. That is really important. Not just following what I do or any other tutorial for that matter, but actually doing the stuff yourself and really ingrain that foundation knowledge. Now, when it comes to the challenge I'm about to give you, you can go to the nth degree. You can really make this your own and just push out the boundaries. I'm going to show you three basic examples here. So let's go and have a look at that. So in front of us here, we have a kind of castle with a tower on the side, and I've made a little portcullis. Now, all of these are made from primitives. There's nothing special going on here. I've not changed anything. I've just scaled primitives. This top bit here is made from a cone. Then we've got cubes stacked on one another. Cubes stacked on one another here for the... or what would we call it? In fact, let's isolate this by itself. Let's select those two objects. Shift and H, we've just learnt about that. And then we can really focus on this object. And we can see here, I've even made a portcullis itself. And that is just made out of long cylinders and some cones put on the end. You can see that you can actually get quite a bit of detail just with primitives alone. Now, it's not the most ideal modeling method, but again, if you're making placeholders, this is really quick to do and you get a great result very, very quickly. Let's bring in the next object. So Alt and H to unhide these things. We've got a simple Mayan pyramid. This is me placing blocks around. I'll go through the construction of each of these, by the way, at the end of the challenge. It'll be a bit of a speed run because there's going to be things that are just a repetition over and over again. But you'll see the process in which that I've used to create these objects. Now, if we have a look at here, we've got a load of stretched cubes making these steps. In fact, if you look really close, you can probably see occasionally there are lines going down. These are all separate objects. And this is not necessarily the most optimal way of making this object, but again, it gets the job done, and we've got Suzanne at the top. Now, one of the things as we've been going from model to model is sometimes it's quite hard to get a visual representation of what's going on here. If you angle it just right, you get some good lighting, but if you're not quite there, let's say looking down on your model like this, I'm clueless, I really am. I don't know where anything is, and it's very hard to keep track of things. So I'd like to show you a few options. Now, I've made the 3D viewport massive here by pressing Control and Space, so you can bring that back out here. Now, the viewport shading options, we're going to stay in solid shaded mode for the moment, but if we use the drop down to the far right, we've got a few other options. And some people love working with shadows turned on. You can see straight away it's given everything a bit more definition. Now, this isn't lighting your scene or anything along those lines, but it helps make the scene have a bit more contrast and pop. Another one that's a great favourite is turning on cavity. So let's turn off shadows for the moment and turn on cavity. This, as you can see, depending on the settings you've got, really helps emphasize the shapes that you've got here. And in fact, it's almost like a comic book where things are outlined in a really useful manner. So you can see the inside edges. Now you can change the settings here because I personally prefer world space because it's a bit more subtle, or you can combine the two. And you can change, you can ramp these settings here for ridge and valley all the way up. You get a really exaggerated style like this, or you can tone it down a little and perhaps lower these down to, let's put them all back at 1 for a moment. There we go. That's quite good. I like that. Maybe have less in the valleys here so it's not quite so dark in these edges. But that is a really nice setting. And as I said, it really emphasizes the shapes that you've used. So this is great. And I would be really happy if this was my final scene here, being able to screenshot it and just sharing that. And if you're on Windows, a really quick way of doing that is Shift and the Windows key and the S key, and you can actually draw a selection, and now that's in your copy buffer, so you can paste that straight into Discord and show off the work that you've been working on, or straight over on Facebook if you prefer using Facebook. Now, this final object here really shows you that you can go to the nth degree. Nothing here has been made using edit mode. it has entirely been made just manipulating primitives, moving them around and just exploring what's possible. So this is like an outside shed that's open on one side, like a workshop, I suppose. And of course, if you wanted to, you could add more objects inside here as well. All of these objects have been joined together at the very end. So there we go. You can see that you can really push the boat out here and make some quite detailed objects. Now what I'd like you to do is go ahead and make somewhere between 1 and 5 objects. Keep them simple. Don't worry about trying to make them realistic, but keep the shape simple and just make sure that the thing you've got at the end is representative of the model you're trying to achieve, not a perfect replica of it. So go ahead, pause the video now and give that a go. Okay, everybody, welcome back. I'm going to go ahead now and make these objects myself. I will speed along the video and I'll do a talk over as to what I'm doing at the time, and I'll see you guys back at the end. Okay, so let's go ahead. We'll start off making our basic castle here. And I may make a slight variation on what this one looks like. I'm going to select all of these and move them out the way, just push them back there. And I'm also going to go ahead and hide them. I know what I'm making here, and I'll unhide them back for reference, but I'm going to press the H key and off they go. Let's go ahead, add in a cube, and look at this from the front. And with snapping turned on, make sure absolute grid snap is there. Now this castle itself was a group of cubes together. It was a 3x3 grid. So I'm going to lay the foundations first of all. So we now have this 3x3 grid of cubes. Looking at it from the front or the side, I can go ahead and lift those up like so. Now this, you may be thinking, isn't a terribly efficient way of modeling. And you'd be right. This can be much improved. There's faces that are in the middle of this that will never be rendered, so it's not very optimal. But you know what it is? It is very quick to be able to do stuff like this and just block things out. And that's what we're going for at the moment. We're just trying to block things out and get ourselves a basic shape. Now we can see here that we've got almost the same shape as the castle. And we just need the turret on top. Now the turret's a different object, so we're going to go ahead and add a cone. By default it has 32 vertices. I'm going to set that down to 8, so it's a low poly cone, and I'm just going to scale it by a factor of 2. I'm going to whiz round to the front again, lift this up to, I don't know, perhaps there, duplicate it and rotate it round by 180. Now at the moment my pivot point is set to the 3D cursor, so it's all the way down here. I'm going to undo that. Of course, could just move it back again. But I'm going to set it now to the active element or the medium point. Let's keep it as default for the moment. Rotate 180. And because we are fixed on a orthographic projection, it will just rotate around the axis we're looking along, which in this case is the y-axis. Now, this won't be quite aligned yet. So let's whiz round to the side and align it. Does that look good? No, that doesn't. Let's go GZ and pull it down 1, and there we go. We've got our princess tower on the top there. The other thing that I made for this was a portcullis, and I ended up scaling it down. I made it big and then scaled it down. So let's go ahead. Let's actually grab this bottom cube here, select everything, and just join it together as one object. There we go. We've got ourselves one object that we can just move to one side and out of the way. Let's move it 20 units to the left there. Right, let's add in a... What did I say we needed? We needed a cylinder. I'm going to also make this have 8 vertices, so it's a very low poly cylinder. And now I'm going to set the depth to 4 meters. I'm going to make it very narrow though, maybe 0.1. Yeah, that looks good. We can adjust it again afterwards, so that doesn't matter. Let's look at this from the front, and then we can go Shift and D to duplicate it, and we can move it along, and we can make ourselves a grid. That looks pretty good so far. I'm going to duplicate it up towards the top. I'm going to hold down Shift so I can move it a bit more precisely. I'm going to rotate it by 90 degrees. And then finally, I'm going to scale it on the X-axis to roughly the right position. Once again, now that I've done that, I can duplicate, and I'm going to lock to the Z-axis. There we go, there's one copy. Then I'm going to use Shift and R to make those extra copies. Finally, the spikes at the bottom. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to leave it like that. I'm going to add in a cone. It's remembered my previous settings, which is awesome. I can't remember how wide we set it. Was it 0.1? Oh, that's the depth. I'm going to leave that as, I don't know, 0.5 for the moment. It's the radius 1 that we need to alter here. Was it 0.1? Yes, it was. So now I can rotate that around the y-axis by 180, so it's facing down. Then we can try and position it in the right place. Let's do that. How does that look? Yeah, that looks pretty good. Now we can go ahead, duplicate that, place it, and then Shift R to do the next two. So that's a rough portcullis. It's an odd shape, but let's go with it. Let's move it across to roughly the right location. Looking good to me. I'm going to hold down Shift to be a bit more precise with where I'm aligning it. So somewhere like that. And look at the height. The height is wrong. Now we've added these few bits on the bottom. So I'm just going to scale that down until it fits in that gap. Something along those lines. I don't have to be precise here. That's something to remember when you're modeling. If you're not making something that's an engineering sample, why make it absolutely precise all the time? G, Y, and pull that forward. And there we go. We've got our portcullis. It's got, the gratings are a bit bigger than they were before, but that in essence is that model done. Brilliant. I said I was going to speed run these, but that was quick enough to make just talking through it. Now, the Mayan pyramid, now that was quite interesting. Let's go ahead, join all of that together. I'm going to make sure my active object is the castle itself, join it together, and then I can just move this out of the way. Now, you might consider not joining your objects together, and in your outliner, oh, here we go, outliner, let's call this castle. You may consider keeping objects separate from one another, as that will enable you to move them after the fact. For the moment, I'm not really concerned about that, so I'm just building them as static objects. Right, the Mayan pyramid. Let's start off with these cubes that we used before, and this time we're going to set them to a size of 1 so we can play with them. Now, typically, to position it on the world grid, the easiest thing to do is shift everything by half of its size. So I'm going to go to the location, highlight them all, and go 0.5, and there we go. The cube itself is on the ground and easy to work with. Let's go ahead and look at this from the front, and we need to decide on the height of this pyramid, so we can duplicate it once, and you'll notice there's an issue here. Because it's going to the absolute grid snap, I'm not able to position it exactly where I want it. So I'm going to turn off absolute grid snap for this one. So I can, let's just get rid of that cube there, duplicate a new one. I can just put them next to one another like this. Now I'm going to use Shift and R to add a couple more of them in the right place. And you can see very quickly how you could make a pyramid by just building them up and up and up. But I want to try a different technique. I want to play and just experience and see what's going on. Incidentally, whilst we're doing something and making this object, it's cluttering our outliner. So let's be a bit more aware of that. Highlight all of these and put them into a collection. So let's press M, new collection, and I will call this Mayan for the moment, and press enter to create that. Now everything's in here. If I do something, it's going to add it by default to the one that we're currently working in. So how do I want to build this up? Well, I'm going to be a bit quirky about it. I'm going to look at it from the side first of all and get the right number of steps going up. So maybe something along those lines. And then I'm just going to delete the ones I don't need. Now this is a bit manual and a bit clunky in places. So I think I do want a few more here. So I'm just going to rapidly go round, I think one more on top of that. So I'm going to duplicate them by selecting various sides and then finally a duplicate at the top here. Okay, but this is obviously not a pyramid yet. So I'm going to whiz around to the side. This other object's in my way. I'm going to hide it. And then I can grab these and offset them. Grab and offset, grab and offset, grab and offset. Oh, I didn't box select that time, so it didn't select all of the objects. So we can see here we've got one group of the pyramid. I'm going to look down on this model and reposition everything so that the center of our scene and the 3D cursor, more importantly, is at the center of my model. Because what I can do now is I can rotate things around, but there will be a duplicate. So we do need to just be careful there that we only do the inside bits and then we'll add the corner pieces in a moment. So I'm whizzing around and I'm selecting these bits here, which you can see is these ones here. I'm going to change my pivot point to the 3D cursor. I'm going to duplicate and rotate by 90 in the Z axis. Then I'm going to go Shift and R to repeat that for the other sides. You can see here, we're almost done. We just need these ones here to also be duplicated. So I'm going to go Shift and D to duplicate, RZ90, and repeat that once more. And there we go. We've got the whole thing built up. Very, very quick. Now, finally, because I want to be able to join this all together, I'm going to add a cube just at the bottom, or maybe even a plane, so it's on the ground, and I'm going to join all of this together to that one object. I could also parent it as well. Let's do parenting in this particular case. So now this object at the bottom can control it, and it's called just plane at the moment, and I can call this Mayan as well. Now the steps here, those were an interesting one to make. I was thinking about how I could do it just using the tools that I've given you guys so far. And the quickest way I actually came up of making these steps is to add a cube, make it the size that you wanted it, and then go into the properties panel here and alter its dimensions. So we want it to be, let's say, 0.1 high, or to save time, in this case, I'm going to put it as 0.2 high. So they're quite large steps here. I'm going to set the X and Y dimensions to also 0.2. So we've got ourselves, oh, sorry, not the Y. Which one do I want at 2 meters across? Let's do it along the Y axis. So I'm going to go G, Y, and pull that first step out. And I'm going to have a look at this from the side. And what we essentially want to do, pressing numpad period key there to focus on it, is we basically want a series of steps going up like this to the top. But we don't want this horrible gap underneath. So the way that I solve that particular problem is scale on the Z-axis by 2, by 3, by 4, by 5. So let's carry on doing that. Scale Z3, scale Z4, and scale Z5. Now you'll notice that as I was doing that, it was scaling about the 3D cursor here. So we ended up with them jumping about. But for our purposes, that doesn't matter too much because we can very quickly just pull them back down. Because we've made them an absolute size, we can control it much more easily. I can then duplicate that and lift it up, and then the good old Shift and R to get the rest of the steps going up. Looking good so far. Finally, Suzanne the monkey on the top. We need something to worship, so let's go and pop her at the top. So add a new mesh of type monkey and go GZ, lift her up to the right location. Look at this from the side, rotate around, and the pivot point's going to catch me out there. So let's change it back to the medium point, rotate. Because we're looking at this from the side, we can just manipulate it into the right position. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm going to press Control here to turn off snapping so I can just place it slightly inside. So when we're looking at our model, it looks like that. Perfect. Right, this next one I'm going to speed through, and because it will take quite a bit to make. So let's go ahead. Before we do that, select the plane here. I'm going to select everything, and I'm just going to join it together at this point in time and solidify it as a final model. Let's hide that out the way and work on our shack. Now, there are a couple of ways of doing this. I'm going to make a frame and then build up some wooden panels, put around it, and then put the shingles or the tiles on the roof at the end. And I'll speed up the video now as I go through that. Okay, so first of all, a base to build upon, and then the 4 pillars. Once I've got that in, I can put the braces across. So apologies if I don't get the right terminology here, of course. And then we've got the slats for the sides and front of the building. I rotate them around ever so slightly, get them at roughly the right angle, and then use Shift and R to repeat them. Once I've done that, I can go ahead and copy them over to the other side and then do the same thing around the back. And I've generated some different sized ones so the doorway at the back isn't smack bang in the middle. Then with some elongated cubes, essentially, I go and put some supports in for the roof and then add in some extra woodwork as well, just to give a more convincing look. I'm not sure how accurate this is compared to a real roof, but it's certainly a lot closer than I had originally intended. And unlike the original design that I've made, I've decided to put some slats across and then start making some roof tiles. Now, this took a while to just reposition them, move them around, see how they actually repeat themselves. We can see just briefly there that didn't go down the roof properly. So, but after a while, I managed to get just the right size and the location so I could repeat them down the roof and across the roof, as we can see now. Now, I made a bit of a mistake here. I didn't put my tiles into a group, so I actually had to use the fact that they are named appropriately, i.e. cube 1, cube 2. They're named in that order, so I could just go to the last set of objects that I created and end up just selecting them back from there. And eventually I had the whole roof selected, so then I could just mirror it onto the other side after positioning it. And there we go. We pretty much got everything all done and dusted. A few tweaks here to hide geometry that are pushed through itself. Now, I had omitted some of the side panels on the roof there, but at this point in time, I'd really hammered home the point of you could basically make any object by just using primitives. And in this particular case, there would have been several alternative ways, perhaps more efficient ways of making a model, but ultimately I got to the same end goal. I love it. Excellent. Now, I'd love to see how you guys got on. So please do share your work. Come over to the Discord or go over into the Facebook group, wherever you like to share your work. I'd love to see how you got on. And if you came across challenges, I'd love to know what challenges you came across and how you went about solving it. And of course, if you've got a bit of extra knowledge, what other tools do you already know about that you could use? We haven't discussed them yet in the course, but we'll get there, and we'll make operations and models like this so much quicker to do with added knowledge. Okay, that's it for this lecture. Well done on completing this challenge. Share the 1 to 5 bits of work that you've done so I can have a look at them, give you some feedback, and I'll see you all in the next lecture.